Greetings and salutations, and welcome to Supernormal Film Society. And today we have another esteemed guest of mine and a good friend, Scott Eric Williams. I have to always remind myself to say the whole word, the whole name, Scott Eric. And I will ask later, Scott Eric Williams, my brother, why the full name. But I would like you to, of course, introduce yourself to our listeners. Over to you, my brother.
Thanks for having me, Volani. As you said, my name is Scott Eric Williams. I'm a visual artist, educator, curator, researcher in the visual arts cultural industry or in the arts ecosystem. I'm based in Cape Town. I'm currently doing some part-time lecturing with the University of Cape Town at Michaelis in addressing access issues for people who don't formally come from environments that offer art at university. I'm also busy developing a new body of work. So I'm in full on studio mode, as you can see in the background. Got some raw canvases ready to go. Yeah. And a film enthusiast as well. Amateur
Of
film
course.
enthusiast.
There's never an amateur film enthusiast. It does not exist. Thank you so much, Scott. For the listeners and the audience out there, who might not know this, Scott is actually a very one of the artists and creators that I deeply, deeply admire their work. Works with fabric and thread in ways I've never seen before, and it's also got a very interesting approach to it. He's a great thinker, and I'm really honored to have him in this episode. Thank you, Scott, for joining us here. And so I'll just, without wasting any time, let me just get straight into it. Yeah. The work with the yarn, it looks so good. It's distracting me. You see, you did this on purpose to put the work there,
Yeah.
because I'm like, oh, man, I'm just like my eyes.
Shameless self-plug.
Of course,
Yeah.
of course. Yeah, yeah. It's really great. It's really amazing. So so I'll just get straight into it. Before we start, of course, with your favorite films, I would like to just go a little bit back into your history, rewind a little bit, and you can just tell me, maybe, if you still, share with us, if you still remember how you got into film in the first place.
So I'm born in the 1980s, in 1980 exactly, and that's a generation that was raised by television and visual media. And my mother was a librarian, and she always encouraged, consumption of art and culture. And I feel like visual arts and also the comic book medium that I was very, very into at an early stage in my youth, as well as music culture as a hip hop head, and then, extending out into other musical genres and film are very closely linked. And and as someone who was very fond of drawing arts, I developed a palette, a taste for certain highly developed visual media quite early on in life. I discovered different directors and also stories in comic books that then led me into the film world or the world of cinema. I think what happened is that I initially, when I got into like Frank Miller, Alan Moore, Neil Gaiman, those types of guys, you started looking for things that were off the beaten path, and then discovering that, wait, this thing was made into a movie, and then going to pursue those, and then looking for highly original, and this was the time before the big Marvel DC blockbuster era where, comic book movies were dominating the cinema. And at that time, there was still pretty much a novelty. I think we're thinking about the 1990s Batman with Michael Keaton, which was a masterpiece. And
Of
Jack
course.
Nicholson, Joker. So those were some of the things that ushered me into cinema and kept me craving with, and I can get visual styles and well-crafted stories at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, speaking of that particular Batman, I think I still remember it so vividly. And unlike you, my brother, I was not that much into comic books, especially the Western comic books when growing up. And it was just a matter of access, of course. Growing up in the
Yeah,
township, it was just hard, to get a hold of these. And also the first introduction when I started getting introduced to this sort of like comics, it was more I got more into manga, the Japanese side of things, and it was also by pure coincidence because I had a friend who was used to travel quite a lot to Japan, and you would bring the stuff over. Of course, you would go to your local, spaza, and you get your generic comic books, or you get
yeah,
the strips that are coming in newspaper. That's not the good stuff, not the good stuff that
yeah,
only the Americans or the Western seem to have. And I was like, man, I need to, But of course, the early superhero films, like you're saying, they were classics. Like that particular Batman, like I mean, come on, that Joker. I think that's
yeah.
The Jack Nicholson Joker. Yeah, yeah, that one's
Yes,
it's amazing. This is really fascinating, and I love that you mentioned hip hop as well. Um, all the guests that I've had so far, you're going to laugh at this. They have their origins as well in hip hop, and I might have to do an episode where we actually discuss like how, because I was also an MC, failed MC now. As soon as I heard my recorded voice in the first few tracks
yeah.
that I used to
We
do,
don't
I
talk
used to do
about our
poetry.
failed MC
We
careers. We don't
don't,
talk.
we don't. Exactly. I was like, no, I don't want to hear myself rapping. That's why I moved on to making music rather, making the beats rather. But yeah, man, it's very fascinating. Everyone has seemed to have come from this nucleus of the hip hop
Yeah,
culture and teachings and the elements and all of that. Because I'm also from the 80s. It's a
sure.
different way of thinking. We apply that in our everyday lives, like how to
Yes,
knowledge of self and all that. I think it translates to everything in life.
yes.
But all right. So without wasting any more time, let's get into it, Scott. Let's get into your five. You can. It's up to you if you want to rank them or you just want
Sure.
to give them out in no particular order.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the no particular order, and it was really tough to select a top five, but I think that
Yes.
um I went with the movies that had a really high visual impact and also had a very off-kilter storyline and were quite surreal in their quality in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
I think the first one for me was Be Kind Rewind 2008 with Jack Black and Mos
Oh.
Def.
Oh.
I was very
Oh.
fond of movies with musical culture, like High Fidelity with John Cusack and
Mm.
record store movies. There was another one as well that Empire Records that kind of led me to looking for movies with more of the 80s sort of visual or media culture, like record stores, CD stores, uh,
Yes.
like video stores. Those are
Yeah.
80s archival experiences that kind of
Yeah.
are signified in that particular time. And so Be Kind Rewind was significant to me because Michel Gondry
No.
was one of my
Oh.
favorites, in developing just this otherworldly experience, like quirky, offbeat, and in two of my favorite actors or creative, most deaf, the connection to hip hop culture again. And seeing, this character that he was playing, which was completely, you know, um, a complete departure from, the hip hop persona, like
Yes.
braggadocio, MC, 16 bars, like
Mm.
I lofty concepts. And I,
Yes.
I enjoyed the comedy. It was like quite an innocent story as well that it connected this idea of gentrification,
Mm.
the sudden fall of the video store and being displaced, facing challenges of paying rent. And it's a story that's kind of connected to my way of thinking about cities, places like Cape Town as well. So Be
Mm.
Kind Rewind was quite significant to me
It's one
in
of
that sense.
yeah. Yeah.
Um
So
and
before
then
okay.
no,
Sorry.
you go.
Before you move on, I noted something as soon as you mentioned Michel Gondry. Of course, Michel Gondry is definitely one of my favorite directors of all time. I think
Right.
I've watched most of his filmography because I was at some point really obsessed. But now you said you use the past tense, and the tense you use is very concerned. You said was your one of your favorite. What does that mean? Does that have any significance? Because I mean, Michel Gondry still is my favorite, one of my favorites. You said was
Yep.
what?
I was saying that Michel Gondry was a portal to me. The word portal is quite significant to me in the work that I create.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, being John Malkovich was also a Michel Gondry movie, and it was quite integral to this idea of the portal as a device in science fiction or popular culture.
Mm-hmm.
And then Michel Gondry was a portal to other directors for me. I moved on
Mm-hmm.
from Michel Gondry. Yeah, I love Michel Gondry, but I mean, he hasn't really released anything that I could
Recently,
think
yeah.
about, currently, So it's kind of fallen
Yeah.
off in my top five
Oh,
list.
oh my God! You use the term for it now.
I
It's
should be
good.
careful of
You
that.
are ruthless.
Like Bob said, he's been, he's been, he's been demoted in the
I think.
rankings.
Oh my
Like,
word! Other films I've seen, yeah, most def, he does the most def with his muffled, like speech, and it's. But on this
yes,
particular on Bukai Rewind, he's perfect.
yeah.
He's just, it's amazing. It's really good. Jack Black, everything.
Yeah,
It's
he
such
found
a
his niche.
nostalgic film. Yeah,
I think
that one
Michelle
was.
Michelle did a really good job with the casting, like being able to curate you know, a cohort of actors, that makes up that ensemble cast that
Mm,
immediately just puts this off kilter, a very left field, very left of center way of acting, or left of center mental state or way of thinking, that
mm,
most depth just seem to embody. So yeah, even Danny Glover, whom I've come to associate with Lethal Weapon, was in there, and he excelled. I think that's also one of the nice things about cinema is the element of a surprise. Um,
mm,
is being surprised by a good performance, or being surprised at how well a storyline works, or surprised that the chemistry that actors have together. And also, with the most deaf situation, it proves that the ability to memorize lines well doesn't necessarily just translate into a good performance.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and we also don't know what was happening behind the scenes on the set, because
Mm,
Michel Gondry is also a guy who's known to push people behind the scenes. Like, there's quite an infamous story about how he deliberately made Jim Carrey's life hell on the set of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Spot in
you
mind, yeah.
know. So, we don't know what the dynamic was behind the scene, like
Yeah,
putting back the guy sandwich, or, like to get like
yeah.
verisimilitude, for the performance. But yeah,
No, that.
so the reason I moved on from Michel Gondry was I also went through this phase where I was binging Michel Gondry, and I came across um, this absolutely brilliant set of short stories from 2008 called Tokyo,
Mm.
which was like Michel Gondry presents Tokyo.
Oh, yes, I
And
am aware of the
so it was
series.
very similar to like the thing that Tarantino did with Four Rooms, where each of the rooms was directed by a different director, but these were standalone stories.
Mm-hmm.
And the story called, what was the name now? It was called, yeah, Shaking Tokyo, which was directed by Bong Joon-ho. So yeah, Bong Joon-ho,
Mm,
the man.
mm.
And
Yeah, the
and
the
that was
Korean
my
director,
uh, that was my
South
first
Korean.
exposure to the concept of Hikikomori, which
Mm,
is the Japanese name. They've got very specific names for behaviors. And Hikikomori is the name for somebody who isolates themselves from society and withdraws from society because they feel so disenfranchised. They feel like their needs are not being met. They're disappointed. They become jaded with society. And the name of this type of person is called Hikikomori. And this particular story was about Hikikomori, who orders pizza, and he's been ordering pizza for a while, and he falls in love with a pizza delivery girl. And it resonated with me because, yeah, I've been single for a while, and I also grew up in a home with very different like family dynamics. Where I raised myself on television. So the story resonated with me, and I just connected with Bong Joon-ho. And then I went on a Bong Joon-ho binge, which also brings you to really great movies like Parasite,
Of course.
which is also a masterpiece. Isn't one of the
Yeah.
movies I've listed today, but I just find myself, like thinking about the fact
Yeah.
that it led me up. And Okja as well, Okja is also great with Tom
Okay.
Swinton in one of the like supporting leads. Insane catalog of movies.
Of course. Yeah.
And then
Bong
Michel
Joon-ho is
Gondry.
one of my
So,
top as well. Like
well,
I would argue, I mean, Bong Joon-ho is also one of my favorite. I would Parasite is really great, but of course, as we know, it's towards the rear end of his career. I mean,
yeah,
if you look earlier, the other stuff, Okja, uh, I wanted to love it. I wanted so much to love it, but I wouldn't rate it. I actually like. I think about when Parasite came out a few years ago. I made a list, and I put like of my top five. Obviously, I love, but I mean, this is the thing. When Bong Joon-ho is just cruising, he's better than 80% of the guys out there. So I mean, but
yeah,
also South Korean cinema is something else, right? There's Park
yeah,
Chan-woon
yeah,
as well. He does his own. They've got a whole thing going on there.
yeah,
But I would say there's another one called Mother. I don't know if you've seen that. Mother from him.
yes, yeah,
Ooh, I put that at number one. I put that at number
yeah,
one. It's Memories of Murder, number two. Yeah. Parasite
yeah.
three. And then the rest, yeah. Well, yeah. Okja right at the bottom.
I think
Oh no.
Okja
The
was
host at the bottom. The host at the bottom.
I think the reason why Okja was significant to me is also because I'm a dad. So also, you go through that phase where you attempt to indoctrinate your children with, this is classic cinema. You've got to see this.
Yes. Yes.
And I think we take that all the kids in our family, like you put them on them. Like my uncle put me on to Public Enemy. And
Mm.
there's certain things that you carry over. And Ocha was one of the ways for me to introduce my daughter to one of my favorite
Mm.
directors. A little bit of a dark story, but I've always taken the position that I shouldn't insult my daughter's intelligence when I introduce her to movies.
Absolutely.
I would allow her to
Absolutely.
capitalize conversation afterwards when the two of us go to the park and we eating chips and drinks and we're just sitting there and we talk about movies. Like you
Yes.
mentioned earlier, allowing the platform sometimes to dictate the direction of the conversation. So Joe was one of those for me. But one of my other top five movies, which was Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Oh,
The
yeah.
Ang Lee movie. I know it's probably not in many people's top tens of kung fu movies, but I have the nostalgia connected to it. That was an experience with my daughter, and we would pretend kung fu in the house, like we came to do after the kung fu. And during our tickle fights, when we'd say things like, and look at, and what are you doing with the green destiny sword? That is my affair, things like that.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it sort of felt like a natural extension of the kung fu movies that we used to watch when we were younger, like Legend of the Iron Fist, Shaolin
Mm.
Temple movies,
Mm.
all of the movies. And this was a more contemporary one that would kind of, seem like in my daughter's frame of reference.
Yes.
So all of the performances in the movie were great. This legend of the sword that had to be protected,
Mm.
the dying master and passing on kung fu to a new generation.
Mm.
The tragic story of these two kung fu masters who had to honor their role, to the empire and couldn't be in love with each other, but they had this
Mm.
longing, be still my heart. So all of that
Of
together,
course.
yeah, it was,
Of course.
yeah. So for me, my top five is heavily dictated by uh, the influences of visual culture and artistry, and then also my personal relationship with my daughter,
Mm.
and in exploring these connections. And so one of my other top five movies was also a movie that was directed by an offshoot of Michel Gondry, but that I used to connect with my daughter. There
Mm.
was a director by the name of Tarsam Singh, who
Mm.
also found his way, from the directing of commercials. So Michel Gondry was the guy that used to direct a lot of the old commercials and the MTV stuff. And then I
Mm,
looked for, okay, which other guys were doing similar things. And obviously you come across Spike Jones. But
mm,
more importantly for me, I found a brown director, Tarsam Singh. And Tarsam
mm.
Singh, yeah, he did The Cell, but you can't exactly introduce your child to The Cell because she'd be having nightmares for, like, weeks. And then Tarsam Singh came out with this movie, The Fall. I don't know if
Mm.
you're familiar with The Fall. Also quite a surrealistic art house
Oh,
movie, highly
amazing
stylized.
film, highly
Yeah,
stylized about these
yeah,
four figures, mythical
yes.
figures, and oh, one of the most beautiful films I've ever seen.
Like, it was cool because one of the central characters was this little girl who was just like cuteness personified.
Yes, yes,
So it's safe to be imaginative. It's safe to have like
yeah.
the stories that we tell and introduce ourselves. And she actually influenced the pitch of the movie. I think her name was Katinka, and she influenced the pitch of the movie. Um,
Mm.
Tarsam Singh had discussed it with her. So also quite a surrealistic movie. A little bit of darkness in places. Also this conflicted hero, with
The
addiction
hero,
issues
yeah.
and what himself,
The hero was
Um,
in hospital,
yes,
thinking about
yeah,
his former, what he used to do. Like, it's a really touching film. I'm glad we're having this conversation, Scott, because you're reminding me of all these great films as well that have also impacted me deeply. Definitely The Fall, definitely Big and Rewind is like, I have this reaction when I hear that, The Fall is amazing. I think The
yes.
Fall is highly underrated, Scott. What do you think? I think it's highly
It's a very
underrated. So,
polarizing movie. It's very
yeah,
polarizing.
for some strange
Yeah,
reason, I don't know, because
right.
I didn't get it when I watched it. It was just beautiful. Then when I went online to check the reviews, read some articles on it, which is of course a totally normal thing for me to do, not weird at all. Just going back and just reading on the film afterwards. But I realized a lot of people it was polarized, and I'm like, what? Why? Then I started, trying to find out why. What's the to this day I don't understand why it would be polarizing. It's a beautiful film, and it's not that controversial or anything. So,
Yeah,
but and it's hugely underrated because I recently went back actually to it. I think about a year or so ago, just skimming through it just to see, because it showed up on my TikTok feed, and then someone was talking about it, and then I realized how everything, all the special effects, all the practical effects, still hold up to this
yeah.
day. The design, the set design, the costumes. Oh, okay, the costumes. Don't get me started. The costumes, and I'm like, they still hold up, and I'm like, what, what polarized people? What don't people get about this beautiful piece of art? But anyway,
Yeah.
I digress.
It has its flaws. It's one of those movies that you have to have a lot of patience with if you're not used to consuming art house movies. But
Mm.
there was definitely one scene in the movie that was cringeworthy that completely turned me off. Was scene where they meet the mystic who comes out of the tree who's covered in mud. I think he's one of the characters that could have been left out of the movie.
Yeah,
It's a highly subjective personal opinion, but I didn't feel like he really added anything to the story. Even
yeah,
when they're involved in the final battle, with the arch nemesis, I didn't feel like he really played much at all. But anyway,
yeah, yeah.
sadly,
I'm with you.
so yeah.
Yeah. So that was number three, Scott, right? Right?
Was it? So it's Be
I'm not
Kindly
sure.
Wine,
Uh-huh.
Tokyo,
Uh-huh.
Crouching Tiger, The Fall.
Uh-huh.
I've
Oh,
got
that's
one
number
left.
four. Oh, one left. Okay. Let's
And I was going
go.
to try and squeeze five into this.
I didn't
Um,
I didn't want to count Tokyo because it's more of like, Michel Gondry
okay,
presents, and
okay.
it's like sort of like, so you have
Next
another,
name.
you have a bonus one more if you want to think about it quickly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, if we're talking about, I don't know the formal term for this, but these movies that are composed of four smaller movies or have guest directors. I
Mm,
think
mm.
Four Rooms was great, with Robert Rodriguez, the introduction of Robert Rodriguez into the whole Quentin Tarantino fold. You know, because
Mhm.
Robert Rodriguez is also one of those greats who gave us things like From Dusk Till Dawn, which actually blew
Mm.
my flipping mind. Yeah,
No,
yeah.
I also
You know,
do that.
he also led me down
Oh,
another.
that
You
was
know, but
amazing. Yeah,
Rodriguez and Tarantino come from the association with Wu-Tang and the RZA, you know,
of course.
and
Yes.
yeah, Four Rooms was incredible for me because you know, beginning with the story of the misbehaviors, those two kids, and Antonio Banderas, and then having the separate room with Tim Roth and just like Tim Roth's whole filmography, you know,
Okay.
like
So
doing the
Singh
Tim
Rod
Roth
also in that
tangent.
film.
Each and every one of those characters in
Oh,
Four Rooms could lead you down their own path, like
okay.
Buscemi, into, you know, like the
Yeah.
Coen brothers tangent and you know, there's all these universes that kind of bifurcate for Four
Mm.
Rooms. And it was really one of those influential movies for me. So all of these movies that I'm mentioning, except for Tokyo, were movies that I owned on DVD. And some of these movies I hadn't seen on cinema, you know, I
Mm.
hadn't seen before, but I bought them on the strength of reviews that I used to read in
Mm.
newspapers or magazines.
Mm.
And Four Rooms was one of those movies I had to own on DVD. Yeah, I think it
Mm.
was a seminal movie for me because it also took me down a different tangent, you know, like the non-parent tangent, but also wanting something with a little bit more of an edge. Um, so that would be probably number four for me.
Mm.
Um,
Correct me if I'm
number
wrong, Scott.
yes,
So in this list, you have two anthology films now. So you have Tokyo, you also have Four Rooms, correct?
I think so. Yes.
I'm sensing a trend here, but yeah, interesting. you
Moving on
you wanna
to
get
the
bang for your buck.
focus.
You don't want to just watch one movie. You want to watch four movies at once, and you wanna. That's your.
Yeah, and that's actually quite funny because even in, you know, when you talk about, you know, very into discovering anime, many of the
Mm.
anime movies also introduced us to different directors with these anthology movies with a full story.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know, like I can't even remember the names now, but there were two of them that I'm thinking of. I can see the
There's a big.
pictures in my
Yeah,
head.
there's one big one. Animatrix was also great. The Animatrix, the one
Yeah,
that
but it was a
accompanied.
way. Um,
Yeah.
it wasn't the greatest for me. I think there were predecessors, you know, like from a
Of
purely
course.
anime
Of
perspective
the yeah.
that stood out that were better than those. And in Matrix, I think there were one or two stories in there that didn't irritate me. Yeah, most of it were just like, so, but also, you know, um, I think this is a reminder of how highly developed my palate was even at a teenage stage.
Mm.
Um, and I think for people of color like us
Mm.
who had to become archivists, it was a harder
Absolutely.
journey. You know, we didn't have
Mhm.
the pirate sites where we could discover the movies. We didn't have YouTube. We had to go to
Mm.
video stores. We had to read
Yeah.
magazines like
Yeah. We
Rapper
didn't even have
Engineers.
internet.
We didn't have internet.
Yeah.
And so yeah,
People.
the digging that we had to do was much harder.
Mm.
So I'm actually surprised to find, you know, how many other passionate meta archivists there were, you know, who went on these vast digging missions. Like for
Mm.
example, to lead us into walking kilometers and kilometers.
Of
You
course.
know,
Yeah.
of trolling, you know, like I had this journey where I was trolling video store, comic book store, video store, comic book store. Well, not comic book store, but like cafe that would stock comic books. I would walk for kilometers down Fort Ricker Road and I'd hit all of these stores, like looking at what videos they had and taking out a video card at each and every one of these and
Yeah.
buying comic books in each and every one of these. And that was my day during the school holidays. Walking
Yeah.
the distances and walking back again, you know, and eating
Yeah.
nothing but a banana or buying a Coke, like on the
Oh, of
way.
course. Yeah. Oh, the banana and the
Passionate.
Coke combo, the apple or the Coke combo, timeless. There's also another banger that used to sustain me and those right. I was like that for not for comic books, but more for for music CDs, like
Mm,
hip
mm,
hop CDs, because you couldn't get them
yeah.
again also
And
online
you
and
couldn't
on
right?
internet.
You had
So
to
you
go
had
to
to
them.
go. because it was a very expensive exercise.
Uh,
If I
I was
saved,
just thinking,
but
I was just thinking about how
if I'd saved
expensive
the
it
money,
must be, you know? Imagine you've got three vices, movies, music, and
oh
comic
my
books. You've
God.
got the three vices. You're not just doing one
And
thing.
games, you know what I'm saying? Including the games goes also there for
And
me.
games.
Oh my
Oh my,
word. And they have communities that these are all like super and also if you develop, like you say, your palate very early for more, you have a thirst for more obscure stuff, more like,
yeah,
challenging things. Oh God, it's just gonna
yeah,
drain you even more your pocket. You're gonna want this. I
yeah,
used to survive on peanut butter as well. Like when I got my first job, um, I was to just eat peanut butter sandwiches after buying a vinyl or something like that, or a game for a
yeah.
month, and I'm like, okay, I have to live with this decision. I'm eating peanut butter sandwiches for the rest of the
Yeah, think
month.
of yourself.
This
Think
is
of
me.
yourself. Yeah, think of, yeah.
Yeah.
So
So yeah,
the
number five.
number five, I don't
Hey.
know the name of the director, but also highly stylized black and white movie called The Secret Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. In my search for highly stylized movies, I also went through a Tim Burton phase. But you've
Mm,
got the Batman, 1990s Batman, which
of
was,
course.
I think, the second one. Batman Returns was directed by Tim Burton. So you've got that
Mm.
dark, macabre feeling, but like just skirting the surface of macabre, in a way that's kind of
Yes.
like acceptable, still consumable. And Tim Burton, looking
Yeah.
for similar content, led me back into the archives and led me into the Secret Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. I don't for the
Ah.
life of me remember the name of the director, but what attracted to me was the cubist set design, because many of the said that jagged sort of configuration and architecture that Tim Burton kind of leverages sometimes to give you the sense that there's something otherworldly going on here now. Yeah,
Yes.
and it can't
Yeah.
anymore. Yeah, that type of vibe.
Uh-huh.
And the concept of this doctor, who was doing experiments was kind of similar to Frankenstein's monster, but Dr. Frankenstein, but not the same. And also in a way that explored these altered mental states and, exploration of dark tropes of psychology and, the harm that psychologists and the medical profession can perhaps have. And yeah, I ate it up. I ate it up. Like it was
Yeah.
just such a distinct movie for me. Um, and I think it also resonated with me because in the 1980s, growing up as a colored youth in the 1980s, watching Afrikaans television,
Hmm.
a lot of the programs we watched, like the animations especially, came from the Eastern Bloc. Like, we didn't have trade agreements in terms of television with the Japanese so much, but a lot of the stuff came from Europe and the Eastern Bloc, and there was a lot of Czechoslovakian and Russian animation that we were consuming at quite an early age. And
Hmm.
so this kind of heartstrings a little bit because it had a very similar visual treatment, along with the other tropes and interests that I had. And so yeah, that was that part. Yeah,
Wow.
I, I venture a little bit towards the weirder side with like
Yeah.
look and feel, and dream
Yes.
states, mental states, and altered universes. Where we might
Yeah.
taste in more. So
I don't know if there's anything else you might want to mention, maybe around your thoughts around cinema. It could be anything right now before we wrap up. And after that, we can also just talk if there's anything that you are up to, you're working on, that you want
yeah.
people to know about.
So it was nice to have this conversation because it reminded me, about the movies that really restored my faith in the medium. Where at the time we movies seemed to be following a particular trajectory, where like the Marvel domination. Nothing
Oh,
wrong with that per se,
yes.
but
Yeah.
it gets a bit much sometimes, and you tend to look for something off the beaten path, or even something that isn't American,
Mm.
or dominated by the West, and so we ventured towards Korean cinema, and, directors like Sion Sono,
Mm.
Jang
Oh, my
Mao,
word. We
and
didn't even get to see Sona. I'm surprised none of the Sion Sona films are in your But
Uh,
again, I'll be very
she was
careful
like,
because yeah, but I love, like, even Japan, Takashi Miike and everyone, they
yeah,
push, they push,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I wouldn't also put them, not because they are lesser in my top five.
Yeah, no,
It's just
sure.
some, they exist outside of that. They're just there. They're like their own
Look,
thing. They're in their own
we
galaxy,
haven't
and they're
even
just good.
discussed like niches in the Korean and Japanese, like
Yeah,
those movies in those niches, like Train to Busan, like what?
yeah, yeah,
What?
yeah, 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 yeah.
You know, like
Oh, the
that
second one I wasn't a big fan of though. The Train to
Really?
Busan, the sequel. Did you
Oh
enjoy
no,
the
no, yeah,
sequel?
yeah, no, no, they should
No,
have
the
left it
sequel.
alone.
Yeah, yeah.
No, it was a masterpiece. I'd be surpassed that, man.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
so yeah. You reminded me about my love for cinema, and you've
Mm,
even shown me how my consumption of the moving image has changed over time, because I've shifted since then to watching series,
mm,
and like sprawling stories, but not
mm.
the sprawling stories that linger into episode 1572,
Oh,
like a One Piece or Bleach,
uh,
for instance. I can't do that.
I
Um,
couldn't get into Bleach. I couldn't get into there's another one, One Piece as well, because it
yeah,
was just going on and on.
look
Dragon
at
Ball
that
Z, I
for
couldn't get into it as
yeah,
well. Yeah,
I
yeah,
need a
OVAs,
logical
limited series.
conclusion.
Yes,
Mm.
yes, yeah.
So, um, I think this was a or pandemic development, is that I started venturing back into series, and I got back into Star Trek Deep Space Nine with Captain
Mm,
Sisko, the
mm,
black spaceship captain. He was my hero
mm.
for a long time. And
Yeah.
you know, to series like The Wire, with String of
Mm,
Bell and Idris. That
yeah,
that really gave us
yeah,
Idris. Iconic
yeah.
series, man. Like Sopranos and
I don't
things
think he's
like that.
matched that performance.
Nah, I don't think there's
I don't think
anything
he's
else.
matched the Wire performance. Idris.
I think you can rattle off the list of like movies, like Boys in the Wood, Dead Presidents. Set it off is
Oh,
like six. Number six,
oh,
Sleeper number six. Um, and
oh.
the Wire.
Okay, honorable mention.
Honorable mention. Set it off, masterpiece. And
Oh, the
yeah,
soundtrack. The soundtrack for me as well for Set It Off.
yeah. The
Woo, the
the best
soundtrack.
song on Set It Off soundtrack was the Five Footers, the Ice.
Oh,
Never,
oh.
never mind, folks. The Ice. That posse cut with five female MCs.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely,
Just like
definitely.
thankfully when you're listening to that. Yeah. So
Oh, that
yeah,
was from an era as well where movies, also films, had banging soundtrack. The soundtrack was just as important as the
yeah,
film. I remember Set It Off,
yes,
Above the Rim, Boys in the Hood, Poetic
yes.
Justice. The soundtrack is a standalone work of
And
like
it
music.
introduced us to
It's
so
just
many bands. It introduced us to so many good bands. Like
uh,
I discovered Goody Mob on one of those
mm,
soundtracks.
yes,
I think
yes.
Goody Mob. I discovered them on the Set It Off soundtrack. Although they had been part of like the Dungeon family with
Just,
Outkast, etc.,
yeah,
etc.
yeah,
That was my introduction to Goody Mob.
yes,
And
yes,
then
yes.
I put it and other bands as well. Even like there was a horror movie called Tales from the Hood. And Tales from the Hood is where I discovered Grave Diggers.
I'm currently watching that, by the way. I'm actually, because it's been on my watch list for, as
Uh,
you know, 2 decades now. I'm currently literally watching it. It's actually on my
yes,
Plex the server now. I'm watching that, the first one. Apparently there's sequels as well, but I'm watching that. I'm on the
okay.
first scene. I've actually paused
Yeah,
it, but yeah, that's what
it's a
I'm on now.
masterpiece.
I'll get back to you in terms of what I think, because I've heard
And the soundtrack.
great things about it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The soundtrack as well. Like that also
yeah,
led me to Grave Diggers. And Grave Diggers was another, you listen to Wu-Tang and you wonder, is there more of this Wu-Tang stuff? And then
yeah,
you
yeah, yeah,
discover
yeah.
that there's had all these little side projects,
Yes,
and
yeah,
so on that
yeah,
was incredible. The guy's a genius.
yeah.
I think that the relation to the relation of music to movies is that um, there was a lot of cross pollination between directors and musicians, and you only hear about these in documentaries, and you find out about these hidden relationships behind the scene.
Yeah,
you
I mean,
know,
Hype Williams was big because of that. Hype Williams became the
exactly,
guy who's
Belly,
because
you know,
exactly
and
perfect
what he did
example.
with Master Rhymes. Belly is also a
Yeah,
great movie visually.
yeah.
So I am currently working on something. The piece that you see over here
Mm-hmm.
um, is a remix or reconstruction of older work which I felt was not so successful. So just to clarify, I weave with shoelaces, and
Mm-hmm.
I weave with shoelaces because of my deeper connections to hip hop culture and how music culture influences the way people of color navigate urban spaces, particularly in the colored community in Cape Town as well. Cape Town is the birthplace of hip hop in South
Mm-hmm.
Africa. There's no two ways about it. What I'm
Yeah.
currently working on is some of a remix of my older work, which is made from woven shoelaces. It's an exploration of how people of color navigate urban environments, music culture, and media, such as the stuff we've discussed today, cinema, comic books, etc. And thinking about how there's an interwoven relationship between how we codify ourselves to navigate space and the things we consume. So I do that predominantly with shoelaces in a very abstract. Uh, I'm preparing for a possible international group show, and so I'm showing some of my recent 2024 work and some of the older work, but I'm also, you'll see a little green setup on the back there and some canvases. So I'm working on some new stuff as well, exploring some humoristic ideas. I'm trying to inject more play and more spaces of joy, the creation of spaces of joy into my work, which is essentially what we did with hip hop and etc. So that's what I'm currently working on. Um, I'm also trying to write a few pieces for various journals on technical way and how people of color navigate outdoor spaces, spaces of relaxation like hiking and mountains and nature reserves. And then, yeah, preparing to lecture in the first semester. Those are my current projects.
And thank you so much for your time, Scott. And it was a pleasure having you here, Siyabonga, for joining us. And we will catch you on the next one. I don't know if you have any last parting words, Scott.
The reason why my name is Scott Eric Williams is because when you go online and you search Scott Williams, there's a basketball player by the name of Scott Williams, and there's also a famous comic book artist by the name of Scott Williams. So in South Africa, Scott is not a popular name, but internationally it is. So it's a way to differentiate myself as a creative.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, you heard it from the man himself. But I guess all Scots are born for greatness, destined for greatness, clearly. So I appreciate
I'll
your
take
time,
that
my brother.
humbly.
Yes. Thank you for joining us and see you on the next episode, everyone. Cheers.
Cheers.